So the Russians and the Ukrainians are having a dust up. Okay, we're going to dissect it and talk about it. Hey everybody, it is me, the infamous Kiki. And who am I? Artist, mom, worker bee, been in the Wall Street Journal a few times, several publications. I am not a journalist. I'm a business owner. I'm a mom. I'm just like you folks living here in America, yada, yada, yada. And what we are going to talk about today, if you have not been on my channel, oh, by the way, please like, share, subscribe, save, spread the news. I promise you I'm probably the only black woman probably on YouTube talking about the Ukraine-Russian war, okay? I love history. I love history. I have a Russian ancestor, great grandparent, so that is Russian from Siberia. So I find Russian history fascinating. Just personally, I'm not a historian. I'm not some learned scholar in the history of Ukraine and Russia. I live in America. I am not, i.e., Ukrainian. If you can tell, I'm not Russian, besides a great grandparent. So the things that I'm speaking about, the things that I've learned, I'll leave links in the description box. I am aiming to make this whole Russian-Ukrainian thing more concise and break it down. There's a lot of mistruths, half-truth, propaganda, disinformation that is floating around out there. There are people talking things out of the side of their neck and their butts that they don't know anything to talk what they're talking about. Things that it can be easily Googled or find out. But you don't have to Google it. You don't have to research it. I will research it for you. This will be several parts. I don't know how many parts, but this is just part one because I don't want to be too long. So sit back and enjoy why everything is going on. So if you have been in a cave or a bubble, or you just don't know what's going on, or maybe you just haven't heard, maybe you've been too busy working, but the Ukrainians and the Russians are in sort of, let's just say, a kerfluffle. So they're out there and they battling. They in a war. The other day, yesterday, the Ukrainian. Well, it depends on what time zone you're in. The Russians have invaded Ukraine by land, air, and sea. We have not seen an invasion of a country to another country by land, air, and sea since World War II. So that's one reason why it's significant. Another reason why it's significant, because I know some of you people in different countries in America is like, who cares? Has nothing to do with me. Geopolitics has everything to do with you. It has everything to do with me. Has everything to do with our economy. It affects our stock prices. It affects the oil industry. It affects anytime there's some kind of large scale war or dust up or anything. Just like if you've long enough, I lived through the Iraq wars, both of them, and our economy, inflation is increased. Like, you think inflation is bad now? Let this thing just continue, and you'll see how crazy things can get. A lot of our goods and services are imported. I tell people the United States does not make a lot of things. I mean, it's just, it is what it is. This great power, people talking about America. America's great power lies within the banks and the corporations. That's really where America power lies. We don't really export too many goods and services. A lot of things that we do make here, that are made here, like, you know, trees and rubber and steel, it goes right back into our economy. It goes right back to our use. So America imports a lot. If you have a problem with China or Russia or Taiwan or Mexico or India, you shouldn't, because literally, if you look at I would look at the the shirt that I have on right now, that's a very pretty African print, is probably made in China. So I tell people next time, look at the back of your shampoo, your soaps, even your toiletries. Look at your computer. What am I on? I'm on a computer. I have a mouse. I have a camera. That's not, none of this is made in America. Your cell phone, the cell phone that everybody loves and cares for, not made in America. Most of the cell phones are made with Korean parts, South Korean, made in China. They're assembled in a lot of these places in India or Korea. So the idea that we don't live in a global economy or what happens outside the world doesn't affect us, you're blind. Of course it does. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, wherever you're at. Because we live in a global society and a global economy, it affects all of us. So we're going to get into it. President Biden came on TV and announced something about doing economic sanctions, which people have done economic sanctions against Iran, Russia, China, whoever. That's the first go-to that countries usually do, is economic sanctions, which means freezing their bank accounts, stopping their money, stopping trade, stopping tourism, no-fly zones, all that, which will hurt a country's economy. So yeah, that was the update in the news if you haven't heard. But yes, that was the United States response to Russia, because that's really the only response that they have. And why is that? Okay, so the Ukraine doesn't belong to NATO. And there are countries next to the Ukraine that do belong to NATO. So we're going to start with NATO. So a lot of people, they don't even know what NATO is. They hear this, NATO this, NATO this. NATO forces are now forming up. And they have, the United States just sent like 8,000 troops to NATO countries, especially Poland, because it's right next to the Ukraine and everything. Like, so what's NATO? For those who forgot, the NATO stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It's an intergovernmental military alliance between 28 European countries and 2 North American countries. Those 2 North American countries are Canada and America. It was established after what happened during World War II. The organized implements the North Atlantic Treaty, which was signed April 4th, 1949. The NATO it constitutes a system of collective security, where the members agree for mutual defense in response to attack by any external party. So NATO is a big deal. Like, a lot of people confuse NATO with the UN. UN is United Nations. United Nations is many different countries. It's not just Europe and America and Canada. But NATO is specifically was created after World War II to form up like Voltron on anybody who will try it with Europe again. They didn't want another World War I and a World War II situation. They didn't want a situation with the Nazis and neo-Nazis and all that. So NATO was formed to, form up and fight together just in case there's some kind of threat. Countries have to ask and petition to be part of NATO, and it's a really big deal because you're coming underneath their protection in their umbrella. Ukraine asked the United States in January of this year to become a part of NATO. They asked the United States, they asked NATO, they petitioned him, and it didn't. Of course, they didn't allow them because again, being part of NATO, there's other caveats and everything. And we may do a deep dive on NATO, but it's a whole thing. But that's just an overview of what NATO is. You hear people talking about NATO, and people wondering what their powers. Another thing, I hear people saying something about, well, this is Biden's fault. This is Trump's fault. The history of the Ukrainian-Russian conflict is deeper than any. It's deeper than any president. I don't care if whether you're George W. Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, whoever. I don't care if Biden wasn't the president and Trump was still in office. It doesn't matter if there was a Democratic president in office. It doesn't matter. This has been a long time coming and a long time forming. If anybody thinks that this Ukraine invasion is anything about America, I would say please stop having America be the center of the world, because contrary to what people believe in America, America is not the center of the universe. America has a lot of monetary power Economic influence, yes. But America is not the powerhouse it was in the 80s and the 90s. Yes, we have a military power. Yes, we have economic power. But the social clout and the social power geopolitically, United States don't have that. I would really say it's been steadily declining due to various factors. You can't blame one administration or one president or one. It is nothing to do with Biden being weak or whatever, whatever. The point is that nobody want no smoke with Russia. Nobody wants to get into, most people, I can't say nobody, but most people in America and outside America do not want to get into a forever war with Russia. Russia has nuclear weapons. It's not like you're out there fighting some guys in Jesus sandals in the desert somewhere with, you know, old antique Russian weapons like Afghanistan. They're not fighting guerrillas out in the trenches, and they're not fighting the Taliban or somebody on some religious jihad. You're fighting a real country with a real military apparatus, real weapons, real nuclear weapons that could turn around and drop a bomb on Poland or the UK or hell, even New York if they really wanted to. And that's the thing that people are not really talking about. And when it comes to Russia, ain't nobody want that smoke, because who wants, I mean, we pulled out of Afghanistan. People blaming Biden for that. We should have never been in Afghanistan. Afghanistan was a war that was draining resources. Do we want another Afghanistan? I don't know anybody who honestly can sit there and say they want their sons and daughters to be sent over to have their lives ended in a war. And then I don't know if anybody really wants to, go through the financial hassle. War costs trillions and trillions of dollars. And the idea that the United States has to go and save the world, I personally believe, whether you believe it or not, it's just my personal opinion here, not fact, just my opinion, that the United States has a duty to protect its citizens and its borders and its interests, of course. But the thing that's going on right now is a European thing. So we're going to need Europe to step up because they're right there. So I would figure that people would understand that instead of dogpiling on President Biden or Trump or this administration didn't do this or this and this and that, the point is it's not about America. It's America's. It's not about us. It's not, in the grand scheme of things. This would happen in any administration, in my opinion. And why do I say that? Because people are talking out the side of the neck because they don't know the history of the Ukraine and the Russians. It is a deep and rich history, and I will try to break it down concisely and easy for you. So, here we go. Let's go back. Let's go way back. I mean, back. How far back are we going? I mean, I don't know. We're going to like the 10th century, the 12th century, the 4th century, 3rd century. Let's go back to the 12th century. In the 12th century, there was a gentleman. Now, look, let me say this disclaimer out here. I do not speak the Russian language. I'm going to butcher names, places, whatever. Like I said, I'll leave links where you can search this stuff yourself. But I know I'm going to butcher the language. I apologize to the Ukrainian people. I apologize to the Russians people, the Russians that may be watching this. I have much love and mad respect for you guys, but I'm going to butcher names because, I don't speak the language. But anyway, so back in the 12th century, according to records, there was something called a 12th century primary chronicle written by Nestor. And Nestor was this monk that lived a long time ago, and he wrote a lot of history. So I guess you can kind of take it for a grain of salt, but to be honest with you, in Ukraine and Russia, this is really their history. Like, this is their heritage we're talking about. So again, I'll try to approach this as respectfully as I can. But there was a Rurik of Ladoga. He was in the Old Norse language. That was his name. He was a chieftain of the Rus, which were these people that had invaded Ladoga or Novgorod. And this was an area that was probably like in the Baltic region, the Slavs region. And apparently they had a lot of infighting over there. So they were like, we need a king. We need to bring somebody in to get this all together. Like, these folks is fighting. Lord have mercy. They're killing everybody. They're burning villages. So they decided to get this man, and he was a tribal chieftain, and they're like, you need to come in here and get a hold of these people and bring people together, and drop the hammer on them and get people together so we can stop fighting. Apparently this man, he was not Slavic, he was Swedish. He was Swedish or Finnish, and his name is a Rus, Rutusi, Rotosi, Roden, Rusla. All these are names that are considered to be Swedish or Finnish names. And not much is known about him. There's a lot of folklore about him, but his dynasty went on to rule something called a Kievan Rus, which ultimately was the Tsardom of Russia. And until 1598, and numerous Russian nobles and Ruthenian families claim male line descendants from Rurik. And the last Rukorid to rule Russia was Tsar Vasily IV, and he reigned until 1612. So this part of history is a big deal. And you're thinking, what does this Ruk and all this stuff have to do with anything else? Well, Russia was born in Kiev, and the Kievan Rus Empire was founded, like I said, by King Rurik, this Viking, in 882, and Kiev, what they say in the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, or used to be named as Kiev, they changed the name, was the first Russian kingdom. It is the site of the Russian capital. In the dynasty, it went north. It went all the way to a small principality around a river city called Moscow, and it kind of spread from there. And, and the Romanovs succeeded them. So Ukraine did not exist as a country for hundreds and hundreds of years. It did not exist. And there was no Ukraine. It was all part of Russia. So all of that happened. So that is the beginning. So why that is important is because when you're talking about the history of the Ukraine and the Russian people, it is you have to have context in history. And you have to bring history into it because it's part of it. When you have a country that's formed in a certain place, and you have people found a certain place, and part of your nationalistic pride and your language and your food and things started at a certain place, and then all of a sudden that certain place is not with you anymore, then there's been some issues. But like I said, that's just the tip of the iceberg. So Ukraine really did not exist. There's always been some sort of rebellions and everything, but Ukraine was just kind of like, out there, it's doing its own thing. And so, like I said, the history of the Russians started with Kiev until around Kiev. Let's take a look at Kiev. It's a very beautiful city. It looks beautiful. So, there was a deep, rich history that I'm skipping over besides that. But really, into 1917, things started to kind of pop off. So we're going to get into that. It started to kind of pop off a little bit in 1917. There was a revolution. So there was a huge revolution. This revolution was started out, I would say, encouraged. I hope I don't butcher his name. But there was a political leader called Mikhailo Herveshvinsky. Yeah, this guy here. And he was a scholar, historian, politician. He was an academic man. He came from a Ukrainian noble family. He wrote his first academic book. He had his own theories about the history of the Ukrainian and Russian people. He really thought and came into the idea of Ukrainian nationalism. He had a lot of ideas, like about the history of how the Ukrainian people should have been their own country. How the country at that time in 1917 had shifted away from Kiev to Moscow. Moscow became the capital. Moscow became the center and the hub of political activity. This man, from what I read, if I get it wrong, y'all tell me. He just kind of felt like he stressed the role of common people. He stressed the role of the Ukrainians having their own governments. He apparently may have been pro-democracy. And then the origins of the Ukrainian ethnic makeup. He researched Ukrainian history back to ancient times. So he was all like, rah, rah, Ukraine, and we deserve to be our own country. So in 1917, this man was elected to the head of the Revolutionary Parliament, the Ukrainian Central Rada, and Kiev, and gradually guided it from Ukrainian national autonomy within a democratic Russia through complete independence. He chaired the Congress of the Peoples of Russia, and they tried to call him a radical Democrat and a socialist. How about that? And at times, Ukraine struggled for self-government. Like, they struggled. They really struggled. And his legacy is, he's considered one of the greatest. Hervashinsky is considered one of the Ukraine's greatest scholars and one of the most prominent Ukrainian statesmen in Ukrainian history. And I guess the question is, did the Russians like it? I would say no. That they did not like the idea that they were to be an independent country. And so it didn't last very long, and immediately afterward, Ukraine was absorbed again by the Soviet Union. And but there was always the sentiment in their country of them wanting to be separate. So that's just part one of things that have happened, and then we're going to get into, in part two, we're going to get into what happened in 1991 and the fall of the Soviet Union that happened then, and Boris Yeltsin, and the dissolving of the Soviet Union, and in a coup declaring Russia and Ukraine independent. So again, this goes back. This is not something that happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. This didn't start with the conflict in 2014. I've heard people say that. This goes way back. So, you guys stay tuned, and I'm going to break it down for you. I'm going to butcher more names and break it down for y'all. But again, the past is prologue. Like I tell people, you can run from your past. You can pretend that it doesn't exist. But there are always things or people out there that either want to drag you back, that want to relive the past, that want to go back to the past. And that's really kind of what we're seeing today. So I thank you guys for watching. And please like and share and subscribe and share this video. And that's it for the infamous Kiki. And on to the next. I'll give a few more days to regroup and research, and we'll come back with another video. Bye.